So, did you ever notice that everybody has a naming story? You probably hadn't thought about it too much, or maybe if you're still able to be in connection with your parents and stuff, there's a story behind your name. Like why they picked it and what it meant and what they were thinking at the time. And if you're a parent, you've probably had that same opportunity as you thought about, you've got this child and what are we going to call them? What is that going to look like? And I got my normal naming stories in terms of my parents named me and I found out that story and then we named our kids and, I know those stories. I actually got to participate just a little bit in the naming story of another one, another person that's not part of our family, that actually my friend Dave, and Dave still attends here, but many years ago, Dave had a third son. And so, you know how sometimes people will tell you when they're pregnant and you ask them, well, what's the name? And they're like, oh, well, we haven't decided yet. They're like, we're going to keep it a secret. We're not going to tell anybody. And we don't want somebody to spoil it or whatever else. And I kind of thought that's what they were doing. And so, his wife's pregnant and it's time to go to the hospital finally. And she goes to the hospital and I go and visit them after the baby's born. And hey, so what's his name? It's a son. What's his name? Well, we haven't really decided. I realized, they weren't kidding. Like, they did not know. They didn't have one, which, negatively, I'm like, you had 9 months. It's not like you were surprised that this was going to happen. But you didn't pick out a name. And so I'm kind of like, okay, well, that's kind of curious or whatever. And, I waited a day or two and reached back out. And what's the name? We don't know. And they're going home from the hospital. And so, being a good friend, I set a deadline. I said, if you don't have a name by Friday, we're going to call him Fuquan. That's going to be his name, And they were kind of like, ha, 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 ha. And they ignored my deadline, by the way, which I don't appreciate. But he has been nicknamed Fuquan since he was born, but they settled on Aaron, which is probably a better name. But anyway, I got to be a little bit a part of that naming story. But everybody has a story behind their name. And some parents, they kind of get creative and clever, and they want to make it kind of funny. And so I don't know if you've ever heard of Stephen King. He is the author, the horror story guy that, wrote all these movies and all that stuff, Stephen King. Well, Stephen has a son named Joe. I'm not Joe King, but he is. Yeah. 3 of you got it. The rest of you appreciate the courtesy laugh. And it's funny because when you think of names, you always try to be creative. You always try to come up with stuff. And here's, I promise this is the last one. Here's the thing I thought about. You know how when you want to go eat somewhere and you want them to name a restaurant and the response is always the same. And so I thought what I should do is I should invest in a restaurant and call it I Don't Care. Right? So when you say, where do you want to go eat? I don't care. But somebody beat me to it. The I Don't Care Bar and Grill exists in Idaho. So if you ever really get stuck and somebody says, I don't care, it's like, well, Idaho's a long way, but I guess we can go eat there. There's a real place. Names actually matter because studies show that when you hear someone's name, and no matter how unbiased you try to be or no matter how, careful you are, when you hear somebody's name, even if you've never seen them, studies show that you start making assumptions about what they look like, about their personality, about, maybe the kind of things they're interested in, just from their name. You may be right, you may be wrong, but we start, just when we hear somebody's name, we can tend to start thinking about who they are, even if we have never met them. The other side of that is true too. That same research shows that people often, because of their name, it influences the career choice they take. It influences some of their behavior just because of their name, which is kind of crazy. And then the last thing I discovered about names that was really interesting to me is the more resonant somebody's name sounds, the more kind of flowing their name is. So like you take a name like Maria, and it's like, it just sounds good. Those folks tend to be more socially connected. They tend to be more influential with other people, and they tend to be happier than people with sharp names. And I'm not going to give any examples, but I thought that was astounding. Just the way the name sounds sometimes predicts what the person is like. And it gets even crazier, and crazy is not the right word, but it gets even more interesting when it comes down to the names of God. So I was talking to this guy a couple of weeks ago, and I told him, I said, did you know there's several different names of God? And he's like, no way. And I said, yeah, as a matter of fact, Jewish people actually have a different name from God. And he's like, no way. I said, Yahweh, they do. I told you that was the last one, but I have one more. Anyway, we are jumping into a series called Finding Your Way. And the whole thing about finding your way is really something that's easy, no matter what your background is. It's something that's really easy to get connected with. It's this idea that even if I do everything right and check all the boxes and do all the things I'm supposed to do, it's not uncommon to feel like something's still missing a little bit. That something's not quite right. Like I followed the steps, and whatever the steps were, for some of you, it may be around career or education or family or whatever, but like I followed the plan, I did the stuff, but it just doesn't seem like it's what it should be. And what we're gonna find over the next few weeks is it really is more about a relationship than it is about the things that you do. But there's something kind of really, really critical about the relationship that so often gets overlooked and is so difficult in today's world because relationships have been so redefined. Like, is it digital? Is it personal? Is it real? Is it fake? Is it really a meaningful, deep relationship, or is it a surface kind of relationship? And it's kind of curious sometimes. We're not always sure how to navigate this. And there's this very simple truth when it comes to relationships. We're going to come back to this over and over and over the next several weeks. The more you know, the more you trust. The more you know the person, the more you trust them. That your relationship actually moves in that currency of trust. And the reason that's important is because you have a soul. And we talked about this last week. As a matter of fact, if you missed, you might want to go to our YouTube channel and check out last week. We talked about the soul extensively. But you have a soul, and there's good news and bad news. The bad news is, if your soul is empty, it's always groaning. It never stops. It's like hunger pains that just don't relent. It's just always there. And nobody wants that. But the good news is your soul can actually be filled. And it happens in a way that a lot of people don't understand. It happens when you know and trust Jesus. And you say, well, you come to church. Of course you're going to say things like that. But I'm not talking about knowing about Jesus. I'm talking about knowing Jesus with a real relationship. And so that's what we're going to explore, because one of the things that Jesus did is he gave us several different names, and he did it for a reason, because he wanted us to know him. And he knew that if we understood his names that describe what he's like and his character and his priorities and his values, that it would be much easier for us to get to know him. And so he gave us several names, and we're going to look at several of those over the next few weeks, over the course of the summer, really. And so I'm glad you're with us today as we kick this off. But we're going to pick up this morning in John chapter 8. If you have a Bible or you want to follow along in an app, you can do that. In John 8, there's a pretty heated, controversial kind of conversation going on. And it's already, by the time we get to it, it's already devolved down into name calling. Like, it's a bad social media argument, right? They're just calling names now. There's really nothing behind it. And Jesus, though, he stays in this conversation. And he has a very specific reason, because this conversation drew a crowd. And there are a lot of people watching this. It's kind of like, unfortunately, when there's an accident, everybody wants to see what's happening. I mean, these guys are getting heated, and they're yelling, and they're calling him names. And pretty soon, everybody's kind of just looking in, like, what are they talking about? What's going on? And some of the people, they were just curious. They don't even know why they were there. They just heard these guys arguing, and they wanted to find out what was up. And others were actual supporters of Jesus. They were with him. And some of them were critics. Like, they didn't like him, and they wanted him to fail. And then, of course, his opponents that were, like, locked in with this, of course, they were critics of Jesus. And in the middle of all of this, I think part of the reason Jesus stayed in the conversation, because it'd been easy to just walk away. Just kind of hold up your hand, you know what, forget it, it's not worth it, and just walk away. But he didn't do that. Because even though they were angry, even though they were calling him names, even though they were critical of him, he wanted them to know him. He wanted them to understand who he really was, and they weren't getting it. So let's look together in John chapter 8, verse 48. Like I said, it's already devolved down into name calling. And when it says the Jews, if you're not familiar with the Bible, if you haven't, looked at this in a long time, they're not just saying, all the Jewish people out there. It's talking about the religious authorities of the Jewish people in that day. Okay, so that's kind of what he means when he says the Jews. John chapter 8, verse 48, it says, the Jews answered back to Jesus, aren't we right in saying that you're a Samaritan and demon-possessed? Which don't sound like big insults to us, but they were incredibly impactful insults in that culture. And Jesus responds in verse 49, I'm not possessed by a demon, Jesus said, but I honor my Father, and you dishonor me. I'm not seeking glory for myself, but there is one who seeks it, and he is the judge. Very truly, I tell you, whoever obeys my words will never see death. And so he's very calm. He's saying, look, you think this is about me trying to gain something or get something. He goes, no. There's more than that going on here. There is somebody who glorifies me, but it's not me. It's not me trying to get to the front of everything. You're going to find out in just a second. It's my Father in heaven that's doing this. He's the one that's giving me a platform. Verse 52, at this they exclaimed, now we know you're demon-possessed. Abraham died, and so did the prophets. Yet you say that whoever obeys your word will never taste death. Are you greater than our father Abraham? He died, and so did all the prophets. Who do you think you are? Which is actually a really great question. Now they're asking it with some anger and some intent and some accusation, but it's actually a really good question. Who do you think you are? Verse 54. Jesus replied, if I glorify myself, my glory means nothing. Again, if I make it all about me, that doesn't mean anything. My Father, whom you claim as your God, is the one who glorifies me. Though you do not know him, I know him. If I said I did not, I'd be a liar like you. But I do know him, and I obey his word. Your father Abraham, they brought Abraham up earlier. He said, your father Abraham rejoiced at the thought of seeing my day. He saw it and he was glad. You're not yet 50 years old, they said to him, and you've seen Abraham. Stop there for a second. Abraham lived about 1,000 years ago. So there is an understandable curiosity like, well, what do you mean about that? And we'll talk about that in a moment. But don't miss what Jesus said. He said, there is a clear line. There is a clear difference in knowing who God is and just knowing about God. There's a difference between knowing God and knowing about God. Jesus was very, very clear. And I know for some of you, you're kind of like, well, you're getting kind of cut up in all these details. Jesus didn't say things just to say them. He's not like me. He didn't just shoot his mouth off and then have to apologize or not say something or say something when he shouldn't have. Jesus was very careful about his words. He said, my Father. Now, again, in that culture, that meant so much. And I hope you had a great relationship with your dad. But if you didn't, you still understand. He's saying, that one that has always been with me, that one that has helped me, guided me, protected me, planned and plotted things out for me, has been involved in my life from the beginning. My Father, I know him. But you just claim him as your God. You don't know him. And for Jesus anyway, this is a huge issue. And maybe as you sit here this morning, it's an issue for you. That's not an accusation. It's just a question. Do you know him like a father? Or do you know about him as God? Let me give you an example. I'm going to show you a picture. This is Corbin Carroll. You guys know baseball. Some of you hang around. You know who baseball players are. This is Corbin Carroll. A couple of things about Corbin Carroll. Corbin Carroll was born in Seattle. I found this out. He has his parents are two different races, so he's considered biracial. He has a sister that plays soccer. I think she might still be playing as it's semi-pro or whatever. He signed an 8-year contract about 2 or 3 years ago with the Diamondbacks to play baseball, $111 million. He's a pretty good outfielder. And my guess is, I don't know, my guess is he's a nice guy. But the truth is, I don't know him. Like, if we walk by each other on the street, he's not recognizing me, and I probably wouldn't recognize him. And as I said, he could be a really good dude, but I have no way of knowing if I should trust him or not, because I don't know him at all. Let me show you another picture. This is my wife, Donna Carlson, in her happy place. We've been married for 32 years as of last Wednesday. Well, thank you. Thank you. There's a whole Facebook explosion that goes on because it's birthday, but no, don't worry about all that. 32 years. Some of you have been married longer. Some of you haven't been married that long. That's okay. I don't always remember her social security number, which for her is like some kind of relationship barometer. I should know it. Like if I know it, like we're close. I don't remember all the passwords on the websites and places we log in together sometimes. I can't remember her passwords. But I can tell you with a look exactly what she's thinking. Exactly what she's thinking. I can tell you what her deepest joys are. I can tell you about her proudest moments, her greatest accomplishments. And I can also tell you about her deepest scars, because I was there for all of them. I can tell you about the things that she laughs about, and I can tell you about the things that she gets annoyed about. And in both cases, it's usually me, I know her. I know her better than I know anybody else. I trust her more than I trust anybody else. And that's the point Jesus is making. When you know your Father, you trust him. And that's a different kind of life. Let me just describe it just a little bit. If you know him as your Father, your life looks different. It's a little fuller. There's a different level of contentment. And it doesn't mean there's never any problems. No, there's struggles, there's trials, there's difficulties. But you have this life that feels almost abundant. You have this freedom that you maybe can't even quite describe, but it just feels different, knowing that your Father is with you. You're free, you're full, you have a sense of peace that's really hard to explain. That's what life looks like when you know your Father. But when you just know about your Father, life looks a little different, a little less. It's not uncommon to feel like something is missing. It's not unusual to feel like something inside you is just a little dead inside somewhere. And again, it may be hard to describe, but it just feels a little bit dead. You don't always feel like you know the truth. Sometimes you hide from the truth. There's not a lot of peace, but there is a certain level of anxiety. You see, knowing and knowing about are so very, very different. Knowing your Father fills you up, fills your soul. Just knowing about God, it can leave you kind of empty. It can leave you feeling like things are missing. Now, I mentioned earlier that your soul is involved in this. And I mentioned earlier the same thing, that if it's empty, it's this groaning. And so an empty soul, it absolutely demands to be filled. And I'm going to get a little pushy. Because what happens is when our soul isn't full, we typically go to one of three places. And maybe you see yourself in this, and this isn't a condemnation. This is just an encouragement and an invitation to say, come and get it filled if it is empty. But one of the first places we go, if our soul is a little bit empty, if we're kind of more knowing about instead of knowing, one of the first buckets that people go to is some kind of substance. And the way it shows up is we tend to drink a little too much, or smoke a little too much, or eat a little too much, or shop a little too much, and we're looking for some outside thing to kind of make us feel good and whole inside. And so sometimes we're searching for some kind of substance to fill our soul because we think that if we get enough of it, that will kind of take care of everything on the inside. It doesn't work, and so often we go to number two. The number two place that a lot of folks go to is kind of the let's call it the fantasy realm. Like between entertainment and social media or pornography or whatever the choice is, we look to some kind of fake reality to somehow divert us, entertain us, fill us up, that somehow if I get into that kind of stuff and I'm embarrassed about my browser, I'm embarrassed about how much time I'm spending on screens, I'm embarrassed about all these things, but somehow this fantasy alternative reality can fill me up. And unfortunately, it's right there in the name. It's fantasy, it's not real, and it's never going to fill our soul. And the third place that we go, and this is probably the most socially acceptable and potentially the most deceptive. We start looking around at other people, and we start thinking, you know what, I feel empty inside, but maybe my spouse. You know, if I really invest in our marriage, if I really invest in us together, maybe that will fill me up. Or you know what, the marriage hasn't really worked out the way I hoped it would. And so, but my kids, man, I love my kids, and my kids are so great. And I'm gonna pour myself into my kids. And I know that if I really just put them first, and we're best friends, and they're my whole world. And like again, I said, it's so socially acceptable that my kids are gonna fill up my soul. Or your friends, or whoever that might be. And why it's such a terrible mistake is we end up putting a weight on them that they can't bear. Your spouse, no matter how much they love you. Your kids, no matter how great they're doing. Your friends, no matter how phenomenal they are as people. They can't fill your soul. Even if they want to, they can't. They don't have it in them. And so we put this expectation on them that they'll do something that they literally cannot do. And the relationship starts to get dysfunctional and starts to fracture and it starts to create issues. And we're scratching our head running, why isn't it working? Because we're asking them to do something they can't do. They can't fill our soul. This is the difference between knowing and knowing about. And Jesus isn't done because he hasn't even given a name yet, but he does in verse 58. They said, you're not even 50 years old and you've seen Abraham, verse 58. Such a small, short answer. Very truly, I tell you, Jesus answered, before Abraham was born, I am. And some of you, you know exactly what he just said. Others, you kind of like, okay, what do you mean I am? Jesus is reaching back. See, there was a moment, you can read about it in Exodus chapter 3, verse 14 or so. This moment was so massive and so vital that every person that heard Jesus say this immediately went back to this. It had so shaped the identity of this entire people and nation. Those two words for us, one word for them, I am. It just immediately, they went back to the story. And it happened when God had seen the people of Israel as slaves in Egypt. And he said, I'm going to deliver them. And he called a man named Moses. And he says, Moses, you're going to be the human focal point of the deliverance that I'm going to bring to this entire nation. I'm going to free them from slavery. I'm going to call them and choose them as my special people. I am going to do amazing things through them. And Moses is going to start with you. And he has this conversation with Moses. As you might imagine, Moses was kind of like, whoa. That's a lot. I can't do all that. That's not me. I don't know. And so there's this back and forth conversation between Moses and God. God telling him, no, Moses, I'm going to use you. And Moses saying, God, I don't know. That sounds like a lot. And finally, Moses comes around and he goes, oh, okay, I guess. I don't know. He goes, but who should I even say? Somebody's going to ask me, who do you think you are? Why are you doing this? Who gave you this authority? Who should I say? Like, what is your name? In that moment, God gave a name to himself. And it was that Jewish name Yahweh that we translate, I am. And as soon as Jesus said, I am, every person immediately went back to that moment in history that was so defining. And it was a mic drop moment. And here's where you need to come pay attention to this too, even if you're not Jewish. It was a mic drop. Everybody in the crowd just suddenly, I can't believe he said that. He's claiming to be God. Why would he do that? Why would he do that in the middle of that conversation, in the middle of that argument? What is he doing and what is the crowd hearing? And maybe even a better question, what are you hearing when he says, I am? See, he wants you to know him. He doesn't want you to know about him. Because, and this is so critical, if you get this, the rest of this series is going to make so much sense. You can't trust somebody that you don't know. He's inviting you. He's telling you, I am God in a body. Do you want to know what God is like? Look at me. Do you want to know what God thinks about? Listen to my thoughts. Do you want to know how God responds to need and hurt and suffering and care and sin and forgiveness? Look at how I respond. Do you want to know what God has to say? Listen to my words. I'm God in a body. And I want to get to know you, and I'm inviting you to know me so that you can trust me. Jesus says, I am is my name. And really, what he's doing, he's forcing you to make a decision. He's forcing you into a little bit of a box. Because if somebody stands up and says, my name is God, okay, I have to make some decisions about you now. Because it would be so easy to see Jesus as, well, he's a prophet, because he did prophet kind of things. It would be so easy to see Jesus as a great teacher, because nobody taught like he did. It would be easy to see Jesus as kind of this spiritual miracle worker, religious reformer, because Jesus did things nobody else ever did. And because Jesus did reform a whole religion, it'd be easy to see all those things and say, that's who Jesus is. And Jesus says, no. Those are things you know about me. I want you to know me. That's the invitation. Whew. It's powerful. It's powerful. He wants you to know him. And again, it's not just because he's got an ego and he wants to be known by everybody. It's because he knows that when you know him, you will trust him. Now, if you were with us, and if you weren't, it's okay, but if you were with us a few months ago, back in January, we did a series called Winning at Relationships. And as we did that, we kind of looked through the Bible and we saw that there is a pattern for all healthy relationships. Not just a relationship with God or a relationship with your spouse, but all relationships. There's a pattern for healthy relationships. And it's very simple. And so I want to put that back on the screen about how a relationship functions. Let's put that up there, this RAM idea. We use it as a relationship attachment model. And it shows a couple things. And each one is in order and on purpose. The more you know someone, the more you can trust them. But you should never trust them more than you know them. And the more you know and trust someone, the more you should rely on them. But you can never rely on somebody more than you trust them or know them, not in a healthy relationship. And you see how it works. And Jesus knew this. This isn't new to him. He is inviting us to know him so that we will trust him. What happens when we trust him? We start to rely on him. And what happens when we trust and rely on him? We commit to him. And then this incredible flywheel starts turning. And the more I commit to him, the more I get to know him because he shows up as faithful all the time. And the more I know him, the more I trust him. And the more I trust him, the more I rely on him. And the more I rely on him, the more. And it just keeps going and going and going. It never stops. I've known my wife for 35 years, married for 32. I know her better than I did at this time last year. That's the way a healthy relationship works. Again, doesn't mean there aren't any problems. Doesn't mean there's not ups and downs and difficulties. It just means I know her better. Now, here's the thing. For some of you, you know Jesus. You've known him a long time. Don't stop. This is an ongoing, dynamic, ever-developing relationship. It is alive, and it is moving, and it is working in your life. And the more you know him, the more you trust him, and then you know how the pattern works now. It just keeps getting better. So don't settle. I don't want you to settle. I don't want you to just go with what you know. That's the easy thing, isn't it, right? I'm just going to go with what I know. I've got enough. I got a good enough idea. I've got a good enough picture in my head of who God is and what life's supposed to look like, and I'm just going to kind of go with that. And Jesus' invitation is, don't stop there. Don't just go with what you know. There's more. There's infinitely more if you are willing to continue to get to know. Because once you know him, as we've talked about already, you start to trust him. And when you start to trust him, relationship changes. You see, trust is to a relationship what money is to a bank account, right? You could have a bank account or a credit card with like the most prestigious financial institution. And you could have the coolest card, like it's heavy and it's metal and it's black and it's weighted. And you got this really cool card and you got this prestigious account at this bank. But you know what? If there's no money behind it, it's worthless. It doesn't mean anything. But just the opposite. No matter who your bank is and no matter what your card looks like, if there's money behind it, you can do a lot. Trust is the same way. It is the money of relationships. When there's trust, that's when the fun starts. That's when things happen. That's when things change. That's when, especially in your relationship with God, life becomes fuller and your soul is filled up when there's trust. So we're going to be talking over the next several weeks, actually, about the different names that Jesus used to apply to himself. God in a body walking around telling us, this is my name, and this name tells you about me. It tells you what I'm like. It tells you what I care about. It tells you how to have life and find life. I mean, one of the names of Jesus is the way. He's ready. He's excited. He's inviting you in. And so I hope that you'll connect with us and track with us through this series. This is going to be incredibly powerful. As a matter of fact, we're going to give you got to come back next week, okay? We're going to give you something next week. It's not available today. We're going to give you a resource next week that'll go along with us every day for the next 49 days. And you're like, oh, I can't commit to 49. Yes, you can. Yes, you can. It's like 5 to 10 minutes a day. But it's going to give you a chance to really dive into whatever name Jesus gave us on that particular moment and what that looks like in your life and how that works in your relationship with him. Because we want to help you mine this. The summer is on. I get it. The calendar changes. Schedules change. The world's different. That's okay. You are too important to put your life on pause. And this is an opportunity for you to get to know Jesus, no matter how well you know him or if today is the first day you've ever considered knowing him. This is an opportunity for you. So I hope that you'll not only track with us, but that when we get that resource out to you, that you'll use it and it'll allow you to not just know about Jesus and kick around with an empty soul and a critical spirit, arguing with people about life, but instead have a sense of fullness, to know the way that you need to go, to have the dead things inside you brought back to life, to have the disconnected things in you get reconnected, to find it to be whole and real and filling, and get on that flywheel of knowing and trusting and relying and committing and seeing it get better. Every year it's different. Every year it's deeper, because at the end of the day, it's very simple. Knowing who you trust is much better than trusting what you know. It's a who, it's not a what. When you know who you trust, it doesn't really matter what you know. Everything changes. So that's what we're going to do. Over these next couple of weeks, we're going to dive in together. We're going to get to know who Jesus is. Let it redefine our relationship with him. Let it give us a vision for our lives that maybe has been missing or cloudy or fuzzy. And then we're going to walk into it with confidence, not because we've got it all figured out, but because Jesus keeps inviting us to go with him and know him at a deeper level. I am so excited about these next several weeks of what it's going to do in your life and in our church, and eventually even bubble out into our community. Let's pray together. Father God, thank you so much for your persistent and consistent love. You always, always, always invite us in. Sometimes, Father, we have to overcome the wrong ideas and the bad assumptions. We think you're mad at us, or we think you don't care, or we think you're not involved, and the reality is you are always invested in us. You are always inviting us to know you, to trust you. And so, Father, this morning, as best we can, as well as we know how, we want to accept that invitation. Jesus, we want to ask you to show yourself to us one more time. Let us get to know you again. And give us the courage to trust you even more deeply. Father, you are so good, so incredible that you would come in a body, desperate for us to know you. We thank you that you love us like that. It's in Jesus' name that we pray.